I played The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap from start to finish recently, and I am here to ask and answer one little question. Does the game hold up in 2022? It is a game that came out close to 2 decades ago at this point, 18 years to be exact. Does it still hold up? Is it still fun and worth playing? If you're able to, of course, because Nintendo sure as hell doesn't make it easy for you. But more on that a little later in the video. Minish Cap is GBA's only Zelda game if we don't count re-releases and ports of past Zelda games. And it wasn't even made by Nintendo. In fact, Capcom made Minish Cap. So we went a full handheld console generation without Nintendo making a single Zelda game themselves, and that's pretty wild if you ask me. The Legend of Zelda Minish Cap tells the tale of Link doing the unthinkable and having to go on a quest to find 4 artifacts in order to save Princess Zelda, who has this time been turned to stone by an evil Minish sorcerer named Vaati. I'm going to be referring to the Minish a lot in this video, but all you have to know about them is that they are a race of creatures who are tiny and secretly responsible for a lot of stuff in the real world, like weapons and even shoes. Shoes are very important. Never forget your shoes. They're a helpful little bunch if we're being honest. Back to Vaati though, he was once a simple Minish at one point, but he had always really been into the dark side of people's personalities. Evil is just something this dude liked for some reason. He is basically the equivalent of what a serial killer would be in our world, I guess, but only much weirder, because who the hell goes around just turning random people to stone? That's crazy. Power is what he desired, so he decided to go to Hyrule and destroy the Picori blade. Picori is just another word for Minish, by the way. They're interchangeable. That is what people from Hyrule call the Minish. On top of destroying the blade, he's also looking for the Light Force, since they are a source of unlimited power, and he wants unlimited power. Tisk tisk. Sounds like a pretty powerful foe, right? Luckily, Link had a little... Alright, Gabe. Luckily, Link had a little help in the form of Ezlo, who was turned into a hat by Vaati, who was tired of being his apprentice, and as we mentioned, decided he wanted a little more out of life, such as unlimited power. Ezlo is Link's companion character for this adventure, and gives hints and some light humor along the way. The characterization of Ezlo is actually really fun. I think he's great. He quips, and I think a lot of the stuff that he does is really neat. And we do happen to get some decent backstory for these 2 characters. So with our foe revealed and our companion firmly on our head, we set out to find these 4 relics in order to unstone, I guess, Princess Zelda. I don't even know if that's a word, but we're gonna use it here. The game actually feels really familiar if you've played top-down Zelda games aside from this one, but I love that it starts with this nice little friend date between Link and Zelda. They get to walk the town square, and Zelda even wins a small shield for Link. It's the first item that you get in the game, in fact. She wins it in this type of carnival game, and she gifts it to Link. It's kind of like a switch on how the guy always wins something for the girl. Here, Princess Zelda wins something for Link. I thought that was neat. It was honestly really cute, and it's kind of a shame that she gets turned to stone minutes after this happens. So rip to that. Once the quest begins though, we get to go to some awesome locales and dungeons. Making my way through the Minish Woods for the first time and shrinking down to size with the help of our boy Ezlo is something that I remember thinking was amazing back when I first played this, when it originally came out. I was 14 years old at that time. Man, that was a long time ago. Shrinking to the size of the Minish allows the game to have a ton of little secrets sprinkled throughout the land, and finding those is half the fun. Yes, the dungeons are cool, the story is, you know, whatever, it's a Zelda game, but finding all those little secrets is genuinely probably my favorite thing to do in the game. You find these items called kinstones throughout the world, and you use them to fuse with people's other kinstones, and if you get the right pair, it unlocks something random in the map, such as a new area, a golden enemy that will give you a ton of rupees if you take them out, and also gives you something really hardcore to get into if you want to get them all for Tingle, who's in the game, and it's a lot. It's really hardcore getting all that. I think it's like 100 of them, 99, something like that. Aside from that, structurally, the game is really traditional. You go to a point marked on the map, complete a cool dungeon, and so on and so forth. The dungeons in this game are varied and inventive though. I still love the feeling of using a newly acquired item or ability to make progress in the world and the dungeons. There's just something about that piece of the gameplay that has just always clicked with me. It gives these games a real sense of progression, and the game uses puzzles to teach you exactly how these new elements work. I really hope they get back to that with Breath of the Wild 2, although I don't think they will. I think they're going to keep it open, but that's just something that I miss. I mentioned the 4 elements that Link has to find earlier, and they are Earth, Fire, Water, and Wind. Each one of them is in a dungeon that is themed to that element, and it's our job to find them. The wind element in particular, that dungeon is amazing. It's basically a flying castle like Bowser had in Mario Bros 3. It's one of the later, probably closer to the last dungeons in the game, but it's fantastic, and it probably has my favorite boss fight in a 2D Zelda game, just by far. Minish Cap has some really fun and interesting puzzles. A lot of them are basically quest lines, and there's even some optional side quests. At one point, you help a landlord find a tenant for his building that he decided that he wants to lease. Something like that doesn't really affect the story, and it's completely optional, but you get cool stuff for doing it. There's even a missable light arrow that you get from doing a certain side quest. One of the coolest ones, and this one's required to progress the story, but you have to hunt down and return 4 overdue books to the library. And I want to say, return your books to the library. Come on, don't keep them. But this allows you to explore the town of Hyrule like we hadn't done earlier in the game. It's the same town, but it opens up a whole new perspective because you have to shrink down a lot and go through little side paths that you didn't even really know were there, or you maybe saw but had no way of getting to yet. And using the story to give you this new perspective on the town, which you've been seeing since the beginning of the game, it's pretty genius. They require actual exploring and some critical thinking, and it's really creative. Some of the stuff you have to do here, honestly, without a guide, I don't know how long it takes people to try it. I knew like certain things because I remember from back in the day. And I think even back in the day, I had to go print out a guide. Speaking of libraries, at my public library, and that's how I knew. And I remember that specifically. I'm thinking of a very specific thing. I'll just say it. You put water in an empty bottle, you throw the water on a chimney, and that's how you go up the chimney as Tiny Link. But without a guide, I don't know how you would think to go get water in a bottle and put it on the chimney. Look, maybe you guys are way smarter than me, but I remember as a kid I had to look that up, and I remember that now. That's the only reason I didn't look it up now, but I do wonder how new players would deal with that. I also want to talk about how amazing the bosses are in this for a second. I mentioned the boss in the Palace of the Winds, but I won't get into that one because that one being my favorite. You can experience that for yourself if you decide to play. But Mazal in the Fortress of Winds and Big Octorok and the Temple of Droplets are just really fun boss fights, and they're probably one of the few times that you'll end up dying in the game. The game isn't very difficult by any means, but those two bosses, they can give you a hard time, and they're really cool. With Mazal, you have to shrink down, go inside of it, and hit a lever inside of him to like shut him down in order to do some damage. It's fantastic. Just to briefly touch on it, the items in the game are actually really cool. Things like the Gust Jar and the moments that we don't see anymore in Zelda games, especially Rock's Cape. That doesn't even work in 3D Zelda game, but it allows you to jump and then glide a little bit. You get it way later in the game, but these items are all unique to Minish Cap. Again, there's no need for them in other games, but they're very memorable. You do, of course, still get bows and boomerang and a bunch of swords like you do in all the other Zelda games, but for me, it's the more unique ones that stand out. But I think it's time to talk about the sad part about Minish Cap, and it's that the game isn't very easy to play. You have a couple of options. If you already purchased it on Virtual Console somewhere, then great. The Wii U Virtual Console going away, it has been a sad thing for this reason alone. Minish Cap was on Virtual Console on Wii U, but with that going away, you don't have a whole bunch of legitimate ways to play the game. Of course, you can go buy the cartridge, and that's fine. I encourage you to do that, but emulation is probably the only way. I still have a copy of Minish Cap. It's a cartridge, so it's hard for me to actually like play it. So emulation is the only way for me to do this. Luckily, there's a lot of modern hardware that will play your games. You can go get newer handheld consoles that are not made by Nintendo, but play all the games, and that is probably the best way to do it, but it isn't cheap. And you know, that's the problem with Nintendo doing things the way they are this go around with Nintendo Switch Online. You can't really play this game, and I hope that changes soon. If Game Boy Advance comes to Switch Online, I feel like this is probably one of the first games that comes, so it's gonna give people an awesome opportunity to play one of my favorite Zelda games. Nintendo is super anti-emulation, but they kind of force our hand if we want to play these games, even if we own them. You might own Minish Cap on a cartridge, but you have no way to play it. Does that mean that you should just never play Minish Cap again? Well, probably not. So emulation, the only way to go. I love how Minish Cap feels like a fairy tale that I can still relate to. Fairy tales probably aren't my thing, but even right now, at 32 years old, playing through Minish Cap, it was a blast. I gotta be honest, I wasn't even going to play through the whole thing. I kind of just wanted to try it a little bit for an upcoming video. I'm doing something, and you'll see that in the other video. I don't want to get into it here, but I wanted to test Minish Cap a little bit, and I did. And it worked beautifully. The game just sucked me in completely. I started by just playing 20 minutes, and then, you know, I went, had lunch, whatever. I said, wait, what if I just play another 20 minutes of Zelda? Next thing you know, I played an hour of Minish Cap. And then once that happened, I'm like, dude, I just got to get through this whole thing again. I still have that fondness. I still think that Minish Cap is worth playing in 2022 if you can figure out a way to do it. I'm not going to tell you to go pirate the game, but emulation, I think, is a super valid way to play. If you can find a cheap version of the cartridge, I think you're totally in the clear. Buy it, toss it aside, keep it in your collection, but then emulate it. I think that is perfectly fine. And while playing this, I thought about other Zelda-like games recently, like Death's Door and Tunic. Those are two that came to mind. And while I was playing this, I kept telling myself, while those games are great, this is somehow better. Even though that this is pixelated and those are not, those are much better looking games than Minish Cap. I really hope that one day Nintendo makes a Minish Cap remake of some kind, like Link's Awakening on Switch. That would be amazing. But something in these older Zelda games, I don't know, man, they were just built different. They were just built different. And it made me question what I think a good Zelda like is. I'm not saying that Death's Door and Tunic are bad, because I think they're fantastic games, but this, man, it scratches an itch that you don't even know is there. Because like I said, you try it out just for a little bit and you're like, okay, let me just do the first dungeon. And then once you've done the first dungeon, you kind of just want to go do the rest because it's so good. So the answer to the question is a resounding yes. If you can figure out a way to do it, playing Minish Cap in 2022 is still very much worth it. The game is around 15 hours. You can put, you know, a lot more into it if you want to do everything, because there is a lot to do in the game, and I encourage you to do so. I really hope Nintendo sorts their shit out and we're able to play all these amazing games the right way one day, but for now, this is just it. Thank you for watching. I appreciate the support. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more, and yeah, I put a lot of time into this video in between filming and messing up a lot of takes and beating Minish Cap, which I didn't expect. That took me like 16 hours, so I really hope you guys enjoyed. Special thank you to members. Your names are on the screen. I remembered this time. I'm gonna say it on video, so I remember to do it in the edit. You guys are amazing. Your support is what keeps the channel going, and I will catch you guys again very soon. Thank you once again, and we will see you all on the next one. Bye.